A young actor is sitting on a London bus in 1973, listening to a woman 2 seats in front of him. She is asking somebody whether they have a house in town or a house in the country. Except she does not say house, she says heis. Do you have a heis in town or a heis in the country? The vowels are enormous. It is the most expensive accent he has ever heard on public transport, the kind of English that sounds like it was issued by a palace. He has a problem to solve. He has been cast in a small musical, in a small room above a theater, playing a character that has never existed before. He cannot work out how the man should sound. He has been trying an American accent all week, and it is not working. Somewhere between stops, he decides. The alien in the corset is going to sound like the Queen. That decision built Dr. Frank-N-Furter, and Dr. Frank-N-Furter built Tim Curry, who died this week at 80 years old, and who then spent 50 years trying to make himself unrecognizable and becoming unforgettable instead. Start at the beginning, because the beginning is not what you would guess. He was born in Cheshire, in the north of England, in 1946. His father was a Methodist minister who served as a chaplain in the Royal Navy. There were hymns in that house. There were choirs. Tim sang in them, and he was good. His father died when Tim was 12. He went to Birmingham University and read English and drama. And in 1968, at 22 years old, the minister's son was cast in the London production of Hair, a musical best remembered for the fact that at the end of the first act, the entire cast takes its clothes off. He was, from the very start, not interested in the safe version of anything. 5 years later, a friend of his named Richard O'Brien wrote a strange little show about a mad scientist from another planet. It went up in a 63-seat room above the Royal Court Theatre. It was supposed to run for 3 weeks. The audience lost their minds. It moved to a bigger theater, then a bigger one. Then, in 1975, they filmed it, and the film failed. This is the part people forget. The Rocky Horror Picture Show came out, almost nobody went, and the studio quietly pulled it from cinemas. By any normal measure, it was over. Then, in April of 1976, a cinema in New York started running it at midnight, and something happened in that room that had never really happened before. The audience started talking back to the screen. They shouted the lines. They threw rice at the wedding. They turned up in costume, in fishnets and heels, and stood in front of the screen acting the whole thing out in time with the film. They gave it rules. You threw rice during the wedding. You held a newspaper over your head when it rained. You shouted a specific insult at a specific man at a specific moment, and none of it was written down anywhere. It spread from cinema to cinema, by word of mouth, and then it spread around the world. A film that had been declared a failure became a place people went every weekend to be somebody else for 2 hours in a room full of strangers who wanted exactly the same thing. That midnight screening never stopped. 50 years later, it is the longest continuous theatrical run in the history of film. Somewhere tonight, right now, a room full of strangers is shouting at Tim Curry. He was 29 years old, and he was trapped, because there is a very specific problem with creating a character that enormous. Everybody knows the character. Nobody can see past it. And Tim Curry spent the rest of his career walking away from it as fast as he could. For years, he would not do the voice on request. In interview after interview, you can watch him steer the conversation somewhere, anywhere else. He had made the most famous entrance in the history of cult cinema, and what he wanted, badly, was to be allowed to do almost anything else. He went to Broadway and played Mozart in Amadeus, giggling and vulgar and brilliant, 4 years before the film made that reading of the man famous. He was nominated for a Tony. He was nominated again for My Favorite Year, and again for Spamalot. 3 nominations, 3 losses, across 3 separate decades. He is one of the great Broadway performers never to have won the thing, and then he found the thing that actually worked. If the problem is that people only ever see Frank-N-Furter, then take the parts where they cannot see your face at all. In 1985, he played Darkness in the film Legend, an enormous red demon with 3-foot fiberglass horns. At the start of the shoot, it took 8 hours in the makeup chair before he could begin work. Once the crew got quick at it, 5.5. That same year, he played Wadsworth the butler in Clue, a comedy adapted from a board game, released to cinemas with 3 different endings, so that 2 audiences could walk out of the same film, having seen a different murderer. In the last 10 minutes, Curry runs the entire plot back at a sprint, room by room, body by body, at roughly twice the speed of ordinary human speech. People have been quoting it for 40 years. In 1990, he put on white grease paint and became Pennywise the dancing clown, and personally installed a fear of storm drains in an entire generation of children. And then he did the thing that defined the whole second half of his life. He started working with nothing but the voice. He was Hexus, the oil-slick villain in FernGully. He was Nigel Thornberry. He was Captain Hook in a Peter Pan cartoon, and he won an Emmy for it. He was the Emperor in Star Wars, hundreds of parts, one after another, for 30 years. There are people alive who have loved 4 or 5 different Tim Curry performances without ever once realizing they were watching the same man. That is not luck. That is a craft, practiced deliberately for decades. Look at the pattern. Prosthetics, grease paint, a recording booth. Every single time, a costume big enough to disappear inside. In July of 2012, at home in Los Angeles, Tim Curry had a major stroke. It took his mobility. He used a wheelchair from then on. It affected his speech, and for a man whose entire instrument was his voice, that is the cruelest sentence in this story. He kept working anyway. The parts got smaller and further apart, and he took them. He recorded sitting down, and by every account, the moment the microphone went live, the voice arrived exactly as it had always arrived. Unbothered, enormous, delighted to be there. He kept recording. He turned up at conventions and at screenings, in the chair, waving at rooms full of people in fishnets who had been shouting at him since before most of them were born. And in 2016, a television network remade the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They asked him to be in it. They did not ask him to play Frank-N-Furter, because he could not, and everybody in that room knew it. They asked him to be the narrator, so the man who invented the character sat in his wheelchair, at the edge of his own story, and introduced somebody else playing it. And when he appeared on screen, audiences at home did the thing they have always done at that film. They cheered at the television. Here is what I keep coming back to. He spent 50 years hiding. Under horns, under grease paint, behind a clown's smile, inside a microphone with no face attached to it at all. He kept taking the parts where nobody could see him, and it never worked, not once. Because you can put Tim Curry under 5 hours of latex, or paint a clown's mouth over his, or reduce him to nothing but a voice in a cartoon, and you will still know exactly who is in there, inside of about 1 syllable. The voice gave him away every time. The delight gave him away. There was always somebody underneath, having an enormous amount of fun, and you could hear it through anything. He was never really hiding. He was just wearing something more interesting than a face. So tell me, which one got you first? Was it the corset, or the clown, or the butler, or some cartoon you watched when you were 7 and only worked out years later had been him the entire time? One line in the comments. Tell me which Tim Curry was yours.